Hello and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Ray Lavery.
My name is Jessica Crooks.
And together we manage and run Trans Matters Worldwide and Trans London Meetup Group.
We do in-person events and online events once or twice a month. And right now we're hoping to move into webinars. We're bringing in experts and trying to educate.
That's it. And so originally this channel was actually my female to male transition line, but we have upgraded it from there. And as Jess has said, what we are going to do is we are going to do all things transgender. So there'll be fresh webinars, there'll be fresh interviews, there'll be some fun stuff if we can think about it and just record it, and things just to keep you occupied and have some fun and help you along your transgender journey. So to make sure that you don't miss out on anything, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, and that way you will get all of the notifications of what we have coming up and you won't miss out on anything. So enjoy that, and we will see you in there. So take care and goodbye.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming. For those who've not been to one of these webinars before, my name is Jessica Crooks. I'm joined by a wonderful co-host, Ray Lavery. And obviously we were joined here today with our guest, Stephen Davidson. We're here to talk about finding your new voice, and we're doing a sort of female to male version today. Now the male to female webinar went great the other week. We're going to do this again. I'm going to set you off in a second, Stephen. Any questions, if you want to send them into the Q&A function, we'll try and get to as many of those as we can at the end. And if you don't get your question asked, leave them in the YouTube video below, and we'll try and get back to them after the fact. I think that's everything. Stephen, are we ready to go?
Gorgeous. Yeah, I'm going to start with a slideshow
Let's do it.
because I made it, so I might as well use it. Gorgeous. I cannot see any videos or the chat, so I'm just going to plow through a little bit of information to begin with about transmasc voice. This is a very abridged version of a day-long masterclass that I do, so if I seem like I'm flicking through the slides really quickly, that is why. About me, hello, hi. I'm transmasc. I used to be a soprano. I'm very much a musician, have been for ages. I'm a voice coach, mostly for trans and non-binary people, but just for singing and accents as well sometimes. I do improv. I conduct a choir for trans and non-binary people in London. That's me. Hi. um, So, what is a masculine voice anyway? I feel like this is an interesting thing to start with, um, just because we don't owe the world a particular kind of voice. And I feel like for me as a voice coach, I want people to have vocal flexibility and understanding and be making the sound they're making on purpose, if that makes sense. And we'll talk a little bit about what culturally tends to read as masculine for us, and a bit about T and what it does and what it doesn't do. But I feel like just as a first step, it's important to say uh, there's no one correct voice that we're aiming for here. So, the sound of the voice is produced when our vocal folds vibrate together. Slower vibrations make a lower pitch, and faster ones make a higher pitch. And pitch is just how high or low your voice is. It has nothing to do with anything else. So it's not the tone of your voice or the resonance or anything else. Our vocal folds live in the larynx, which is the bumpy cartilage we feel go up and down if we yawn or swallow. If you want to feel it, put your fingertips lightly on your neck and yawn and swallow. You should feel a little bump going up and down. There are lots of bits of cartilage and muscle holding and moving the larynx. The larynx itself is 5 different bits of cartilage stuck together, which is great because it means it's very malleable. It means that a lot of how our voice sounds has to do with muscle memory and habit rather than just being put together in a particular way. Right. So the effects of testosterone on a voice. Your vocal folds thicken when you take testosterone. But if you're older than about 17 or 18, they're generally not going to lengthen as they might in a cis male puberty. That's because they live in the larynx, as we just learned, and because it's made out of cartilage, past a certain age, it just doesn't get any bigger. So if the house they live in doesn't get bigger, they don't get bigger, but they thicken. Because they're thicker, they move slower, and the pitch drops. Most folk will see the vast majority of their vocal changes within their first year on T, which is different from other things that happen on T, which will take sometimes years to fully settle in. Most of the time when we take T, we have a little bit of vocal instability and some trouble matching pitch. So a note that you could sing comfortably before, you might have trouble finding that note and putting it in the right kind of spot for it to be in tune and feel secure for you. It doesn't mean you've forgotten how to speak or sing. It just means that the muscle memory for your old voice no longer suits your new voice and it needs to be relearned. That's all. So most people lose some of their higher notes. Some people keep them. Depends on your voice type and luck of the draw, if I'm honest. Most people have some low notes up here. An average voice will gain about an octave worth of notes on the bottom. But it completely depends, again, on what your voice type was to begin with. If you already had a low voice, it might not have that far to go. The high notes that kind of disappear for a while will often come back, but they'll just feel a little bit different to use. They'll feel like a light falsetto. So all of these sounds up here that were maybe part of your natural voice before now feel a little bit light and thin. And yeah, that's completely par for the course. Our voice has different registers, and where those registers sit shifts as our pitch shifts. It can be fun to measure the pitch of a changing voice, and I think it's particularly useful to try and distinguish between changes in pitch and changes in tone or resonance, because the same pitch can sound very different depending on how you're speaking otherwise. I warmly recommend, if you're going to use an app, picking one that isn't gendered or where you can turn that off. You can also just try counting to 5 in your regular speaking voice and matching the average pitch to a keyboard or other instrument. So even if you're not really super musical, you can download a keyboard app for free. And that can be a really useful way to keep track of pitch. Most of them you can label the keys, so you don't even have to know what they are. Right. So resonance and placement. The way our voice sounds and is perceived is very tied to how it resonates, often even more than pitch. Sounds that are darker tend to read more masculine and brighter more feminine. Voices that resonate more from the chest tend to read more masculine and from the head more feminine. This is different from head and chest voice in singing terms, which we can come back to at the end if folks have questions about singing. But for now, I just mean, where do you feel your voice centered when you speak? Is it more down in your chest or up in your head? As an example, I'm going to choose just a nice middle range pitch. So this note is an E3, which is the E below middle C if you're a music nerd, but also it's fine if you're not. And if I speak at that pitch with a really light resonance and a bright tone, and I'm a little bit up in my head, I could even turn it up to make it a little bit cutesier, with a little bit of smiling. This brightness at that pitch is bright and buzzy enough that I would absolutely get called ma'am on the phone. But if I speak at that same pitch, which is not super low, not super high, but I use a darker tone and I use a little bit of chest voice, I've not lowered the pitch that my voice is, but this will absolutely read as masculine, whether someone can see my beard or not. And I think that's really important to know, because if you're not on or not going to go on T, that's completely fine. And there's actually quite a lot you can do with a voice without the pitch dropping. And vice versa, there are lots of people who've been on tea for years and still have a really bright, buzzy voice just because they're using their old vocal habits and or they like having a bright, buzzy voice. And that's purely down to how we're using it. That's not what the instrument is. When our vocal folds thicken but don't lengthen, because they live in their small little cartilage house, it means that the pitch is going to lower, but the resonance will automatically change. It's a little bit like putting cello strings onto a violin, if that makes sense. The muscles and cartilage around our larynx and that make up our larynx are flexible and can move, but it takes conscious effort to change vocal habits. Above the larynx, we have an open space called the pharynx, which has lots of little muscles that move it. This is the first place we can change resonance. So that little bump that you felt in your throat before, basically all the open space above it is called the pharynx. If your larynx kind of drops down like you're yawning, that space gets bigger. And if your larynx kind of lifts up, that space gets smaller. We can also kind of stretch it a little bit out to the side to make it big and fat as well, kind of like when you do a big yawn. The bigger that space is, broadly, the darker your sound will be. It'll get that kind of nice cello-y boominess to it, no matter what the pitch. And vice versa. If we make that space really small, then our voice tends to get a little bit lighter and brighter, and has a sort of slight buzzy quality. Neither is good or bad, but it's a fun thing to notice we have control over. Think of your pharynx as your own inner cathedral to let your voice resonate. So if you've ever been in a church or like a parking garage, if you're not a church person, any big building where there are lots of hard surfaces and you make a lot of noise, you'll hear that your sound is boomy and echoey and it carries and it's just a really rich, full sound, purely because that's the space that you're standing in. And vice versa, if you're in a tiny little room with carpets or anywhere that isn't going to give you that resonance, you'll notice that your voice changes just in response to that resonance. But we can create a little space for ourselves in the back of our throat purely through controlling those muscles. It's a little bit like yawning. We'll do a few exercises in a minute. So if you're having trouble picturing this, don't worry. We'll have a little go through a voice exercise tour. But this is why we're doing that, is because we want a nice big open space there. The other thing you need to know about is breath. This is particularly important if you bind or if you ever did bind, because your ribs will be a little less flexible. Your shoulders might slope a little bit. You might have a little bit less room to expand to take in oxygen. But of course, breath is how we make the sound when we're speaking. So it is really important. Beyond just the whole we need oxygen to breathe paradigm. So when we breathe in, there's a big flat muscle around the whole bottom of our rib cage called the diaphragm, and it pulls down and it sucks air into our lungs. It's kind of like a bellows, if you've ever used a bellows or seen one in an old-timey cartoon at this point. One of those kind of squeezy things that you'd fan a fire with. So it sucks air in, and then if we push air out, that's our tummy muscles pushing against our diaphragm, because muscles only squeeze in one direction. When we take a deep breath, we say deep because the air goes deep down into your body, like right down to your belly button sometimes. We're letting our whole tummy and sides and sometimes even lower back expands to take that air in. And that's sort of, it's the default correct way to breathe for anybody, and it's what we would naturally do in our sleep. But it becomes really important if you bind, because that's where you have the movement to take in enough air. Yeah. So here we have a little picture of Pingu. He's a claymation penguin. Having worked with people from different ages from all over the world, miraculously, almost everybody recognizes Pingu. There's just something about him. But he's also a great example of good vocal technique. So when he's making a big, loud sound, you can see his tummy muscles are squeezing to push that air. And you can see that his whole mouth has just kind of turned into a big, open, resonating chamber. So for us who don't have beaks, the resonating chambers are everything above your larynx. So that bit before that we mentioned, the pharynx, and the whole inside of your mouth. And in fact, the inside of your whole head and your whole chest, we resonate our voice through all of that. So if we want a big, full sound, we open all of those up and we push the air with our tummy. Gorgeous. So this presentation is also for people who work with trans folks, which is why I have bothered to include, don't make people take their binder off. If you are trans, don't let people make you take your binder off if you don't want to, I guess, is the upshot of that. It does mean that you need to breathe properly, and I would warmly recommend a little stretch after taking it off to keep those intercostal muscles moving. Intercostal muscles are the ones that are in between each set of ribs that kind of hold them together. Beautiful. So, embodiment. We use our whole body to make and resonate sound. Some folks are more comfortable than others with engaging mentally and emotionally with their own body. I feel like for me, the more practical and mechanical information we have about how a voice works, the easier it is to sort of use it as a tool, which is one of many reasons I'm very technical when I explain these things. It means that part of the delight and challenge of voice work is taking a moment to check into our own bodies, to be there, so that we can feel what's going on, so we know what's where, and we can start to learn the vocal skills that we need. Perhaps unsurprisingly, trans folk broadly are not great at proprioception. Proprioception is the sense where you know where the bits of your body are when you're not looking at them. I think because a lot of us sort of just naturally disengage a little bit as a coping mechanism. Statistically, folk who are on the autism spectrum are also a little bit slow at that. And there's a big overlap, of course, between the trans community and the autistic community. So the odds are slightly stacked against us, re-embodiment, which is why, for me, whenever I'm working on voice with anybody, no matter how good or how much of a beginner they are, it starts with a little stretch and a little sort of neck, jaw massage, just so we can check in to the bits that we're using. So if we do that later, that's why. Beautiful. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just really aging myself, but when I picture dissociation or like a brain in a jar, it's always Richard Nixon from The Simpsons. And that was long enough ago that I've very much dated myself now. But I feel like it's a classic. Good. I think, yeah. That's where I'm going to pause this and check in, firstly, if there are any questions, because that was a lot of information. And then secondly, maybe we'll do a couple of very gentle exercises.
Oh, I love the sound of gentle exercises. I really do.
We've
yeah.
no questions thus far in, so maybe we should go to this.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Oh, I have questions.
Go on.
Well, it depends what you're going to do. There's no point asking questions now if you're going to answer them later. Do you know what I mean? So it's very good to know the bits about that. Now, I guess for me, I'm like now 2 years on T, and it was only really around month 11 where I started getting seen as sounding male and actually passing as male. But it was about 18 months on T before I started passing, and even still on the phone, it's about 80-20 is the rule. No, it's about 80-20. So that's all I guess just kind of the way that it is. I mean, I know when people watch the timelines, they're like, oh, within 6 months, I'll have a voice drop. No. Maybe you will, but not to the level that you probably need, and very unusual. Now, yeah, a question, or not a question, a thing that you said there, and I know that I've heard this many times before, is that obviously your vocal cords will thicken, but the larynx won't lengthen. Now, is that the same as developing an Adam's apple? Like, is that because I have seen FTMs that are older who have developed Adam's apples, and I know that's a lot to do with genetics. Now, is that anything to do with the larynx, or is that just
Yeah, so the Adam's apple is this bit of cartilage right on the front of your larynx.
yeah?
It's the thyroid cartilage specifically. And the size of that is purely down to luck, genetics. If you start T young enough, it might grow a bit. If it's more pronounced when you're older, that's probably just everything being a little bit more pronounced and knobbly generally.
Mm. Okay, but does it have anything to do with sort of the resonance side of things?
Visually, this not wildly. No,
No. Okay, so it's irrelevant basically. It's just nice to have, but not going to make a difference to the voice.
not wildly. There are definitely some cis men who end up with really big, sort of bulbous ones, and they tend to have quite low voices. That visually out there is because the inside has grown as well and stretched it all out. But there's no one-to-one comparison on that.
Okay, no, no. Okay, very good. Okay, and um, you also talked about sort of the earlier stages where the upper ranges of your voice will disappear, but you said that mostly that will come back. Now, is there a scenario where that doesn't come back? Because I have lost all upper range. Like you, I used to be a soprano, terrible singer. Nobody wants me to sing, but I used to like the songs on the radio were too low to sing. Now I can't sing anything that's like in the female range at all. Like it's gone.
That's a really common experience. That doesn't mean it's gone. It means you need to relearn how to use it. Um, I'm going to be really technical here, but I can't help myself. So when we're speaking in our regular voice here, in our chest voice, if you're thinking about singing terms, our vocal folds are making full contact like this. But when we're up here in our sort of falsetto or head voice, oh, if I wanted to sing a high note up there, they're not touching actually. It's just the membrane around them that's touching. Which is why there's like a big gear change from the top part of our voice down to the bottom part of our voice. Um, and controlling that gear change is one of the big challenges of dealing with a changing voice, whether you're a teenage boy or uh, any age of transmasculine person. It's relearning how to find that sound. I promise it's still there.
Okay, so all right. So I did years ago do some sort of singing lessons, and one of the things the teacher had said was that in order to make the upper ranges sound better or stronger, was basically he almost described as going down to go up. So I think it's a little bit what you're talking with the diaphragm, is that you basically give more resonance. So it's kind of like gearing down in a car so that you've more power to go up. It doesn't mean that it's a forceful sound,
Yes.
but that's it. So how do you regain that? What do you do?
Let's do a couple of warm-ups and see what happens.
Okay. Is this ones where I have to participate or like
No, it's ones where you get to participate.
excellent. All right. So that mean I leave myself on this microphone.
No,
I
I
mean,
think
that's
I think
probably a
you should
terrible
show
thing for
everybody,
everybody
Ray.
to
I
do.
think we should focus on you. It should be all you, baby.
No, I think not. There's quite a lot of people here. That's the opposite. So I'll probably turn it off so that people don't have to listen to that. Oh, it's gonna be awful.
Well, maybe we'll check in later.
Okay.
This was your idea. Here we are.
Yeah. Well, I want to know, and I will definitely be trying it.
Gorgeous. All right, we're gonna start with a tiny little warm up though. First thing we're gonna do is some shoulder rolls. Start with tiny little baby ones. Just get your shoulders used to the idea. And when they feel like, oh yeah, that's fine, have some big crunchy ones. Apologies for the reminder that you have shoulders. We're going to do a little neck stretch as well. So first, just tip your ear down to your shoulder. If you were at the masterclass a month ago, this is very similar. I make pretty much everyone do the same warm-up because it's all the same equipment. We're going to very slowly roll down so our nose is to that armpit. We're just helping ourselves to a real slow semicircle. So we're coming down, so our chin is down to our chest. Take a breath there, have a moment, feel the muscles that you're stretching. And come on round to the other armpit. Feel what that stretches. If you're stretching anything and it feels tight and like the stretch is a good idea, try to stay there for a good minute. And come on and roll up to that side. It takes the impulses that move our muscles about 45 seconds to fully chill out. So if you need a deep stretch, just hang out there for a sec. Beautiful. And then straighten your head up. Usually for neck stretches, I just have people do a little semicircle. If you know it's a good idea for your neck, go ahead and stretch it back. But if you have a bad neck, that's a great way to hurt it. So I wouldn't include that as a default. We're going to give ourselves a little neck massage as well. Aren't we lucky? Take a moment, give it a squeeze. If anything feels kind of sore or knobbly, give it an extra little squish, reminded it can chill out. If everything back there feels fine, congratulations. Take a moment to make a little mental map of what you can feel back there. We're taking the time just to check in to the stuff that we're using. And when you're ready, come on round, give your jaw a gentle squeeze as well. I hope everyone camera off is participating. Just gently. A jaw is a really easy muscle to clench, particularly if you've had a stressful day. So just give it a little squish. Beautiful. And last one of these, we're gonna push our thumbs up behind our chin. Give the base of our tongue a little squish. So your tongue comes all the way down here. And it's important to check that it's relaxed because it's attached to your larynx and can pull it up a little higher than you want it to be. Beautiful. So just a little gentle check-in. Say hello to that. Good. I have two more things in this vein for you, just because, particularly for transmasc voices, tension is very much our enemy. But it's the enemy of all good vocal technique. So even if you're not transmasc, come along with us and do this. Step number 1, you're going to clasp your hands in front of your head. Step number 2, you're going to let your jaw just kind of hang. And step number 3, you're going to shake them and make a noise. And it's going to look real stupid, but do it anyway.
I'm very glad we're recording this for the record.
Good. Me too. For posterity, right? But it's a really good exercise to check if you're clenching your jaw, because if you are, it's not going to go anywhere. And if you're squeezing it back here, everything's going to be really tight just to begin with. And why do things the hard way, really? I would also love us to take a moment to sort of bobble our head around, nod it back and forth. Can you find the spot where it balances with the least amount of effort? Yeah. Good. Really nice, gentle, upright posture is definitely our friend because it means that this whole space is in line and relaxed and open, and we're not sort of squishing it awkwardly or clenching anything. And also, why work harder than you need to hold your head up? Am I right? Life's hard enough. Like this posture moment, anything that we do vocally shouldn't feel like lots of physical work. It should always be ergonomic and a little bit lazy. Gorgeous. So we squished the bottom of our tongue a little bit before. We're now going to do a little stretch for it. Step number 1, stick it out. If that feels okay and you'd like a deeper stretch, keep it out and gently try to yawn. You feel it, right? It is a nice deep stretch, so efficient. If you only have time for one stretch, make it this stretch. Gorgeous. So we're going to do that stretch again. We're going to enjoy the juicy, juicy pull at the base of your tongue. And this time when you put your tongue back in, I'd love you to try and think about it just sitting gently along the bottom of your mouth, kind of like a pool of tongue. Right? Mm-hmm. Just sit there for a second with it really nice and relaxed. Feel that feeling. You might feel a little bit more space in your mouth if you are a habitually tense tongue person. Particularly at the back, you might notice, it's dropped a little bit. Just for fun, keep your tongue as relaxed as you can. Obviously, you'll need to move the tip a little bit to say words. And just say a really nice boring sentence, like, my name is Stephen, I live in London. Good. So this is one of many building blocks that we'll kind of think about to help make space in here without having to force anything open. Step number one is just relax your tongue a little bit. Just let it chill out. It doesn't have to help as much as it thinks it does. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. The next thing we're going to do is some big, slidey, cowardly lion yawns. So we're going to start as high as we comfortably can and just slide right down. Beautiful. Do a couple more. Treat yourself. See if you can start each one a tiny little bit higher. Just lightly and gently. Gorgeous. So the big yawn is really good for stretching and opening up all of this space that we want to just kind of naturally be sitting in a slightly more open setting. It's also really good just for feeling what's going on at the back of your mouth. So on the top of your mouth at the front, you have a hard bit called the hard palate. And behind that, you have a squishy bit called the soft palate. It's where the uvula kind of hangs down from. And when we yawn, it naturally goes up. It makes lots of nice open space. But we can just kind of move it up and down. So it's a really nice, it's one of these proprioception, oh, I can move that muscle moments that's a little bit fun. I'll show you it on me. It's your lucky day. Do you see that going up and down? So that bit, get to know the back of your throat, spend an hour, have a little flashlight and mirror moment, hours of fun. And that little guy going up and down is one of the things that we can do to help make lots of lovely space at the back of our mouth. And it happens naturally when we yawn. So warmly recommend a yawn as part of our warm-up. Does that make sense? Soft palate is one of those things that you won't really think about ever in your life unless you go take singing lessons. And then it's suddenly very fascinating.
I actually didn't know you could move it. Now
Yeah.
I do, because I've just felt that for the first time. I guess it's all subconscious, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing, is when we're speaking, we're not thinking about how we're talking. We're thinking about what we want to say. And hopefully part of your brain is also listening a little bit. So finding room to think about voice is kind of tricky. It's not impossible, but I think adjusting how we use our speaking voice, especially if you're not used to voice work, is hard mental work. It should not be hard physical work. If it hurts, you're doing it wrong. Absolutely stop. But it does take a lot of focus.
Takes time, takes experience.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems what it takes is first awareness. and then spending time thinking about, well, hang on a second, how am I actually using my voice and how does it sound? So I guess even just playing around with that will help enormously, you know? So definitely when I did the yawning, I was definitely able to reach higher pitches for sure. Good job, Stephen.
Oh, were you?
You've done this
I was.
before, right?
But it's funny that I'm asking this question because the one thing that everybody wants to do is to go lower. It's the opposite to what I just asked a question about. But I mean, for me, it's been able to use all of the ranges. Like I tried to sing "Happy Birthday" and it just sounded awful, just terrible, you know.
To be fair, that's a terrible and difficult song because it starts lower than you think it's going to start and ends higher than you think it's going to end.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what about reaching the lower end of the range? Now, for instance, there will be a lot of people who are maybe not on T yet, and obviously there are going to be people who will never want to be on T or are not going to be on T. So, what can they do to sort of reach the lower end?
Um, so I would say first we're gonna think about resonance, and then maybe as an afterthought we can lower pitch by a couple of notes. Um, if you try to force your pitch to as low as you possibly can, you're gonna strain yourself and sound a little bit silly. So actually, if we let it settle to the low end of comfortable, and then think about resonance and opening up, that's gonna set you up better for long-term vocal health as well as reading how you'd like to read, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. So we did this one in the last webinar, but it's a great exercise and it's silly. So I'm gonna make you do it again. And it's the big dog, small dog thing. Do you remember it? It's silly. Humor me. We're gonna do it backwards this time though, because the last one was a trans femme class, and yeah. So we're gonna do a small dog first. First, you're going to pant like a really tiny little chihuahua, and you can kind of feel when you lift everything up in there to make that tiny little chihuahua sound. It makes a tiny little space, and if you wanted to try and speak with that tiny little space, you might find that your voice got a little bit brighter than it was before. And now, just for fun, let's pant like a very big dog, like you're a Saint Bernard. Probably your tongue went down, like we were thinking about before, but also probably all of this kind of opened up a little bit. And if we wanted to kind of speak as this big dog, we might kind of notice that, oh, our voices are a little bit bigger and boomier than they were before. I'm turning this up to a 10 out of 10, so it's really obvious what I mean. But this is where the muscle is that makes that bit bigger. And if you want to maybe leave it as an 8 out of 10, so it feels like a more natural use of your voice, that's cool too. Does that make sense? Gorgeous. Um, just because I'm pushy and awful, Ray, can I hear your big dog voice?
Sure. Can you hear that?
Yeah, and now can you say a couple of words as the big dog? Something really boring, like, my name is Ray and I live.
My name is Ray and I'm a very big dog.
Yeah, gorgeous. Beautiful. What do you notice about the sound?
Yeah, well, it's deeper, but it's also fuller. It's way more full than it was before. Um, and again, I mean, just doing that exercise, you felt like as you said, your tongue drop, but also everything, like that bit that you were talking about, the uval at the back, you could feel where it was actually sitting, which again, I've never been conscious of before.
Yeah, exactly. Gorgeous. The tongue dropping, particularly at the back, it's an important one. We don't want to force it down as far as we possibly can, but the more we kind of are aware of it and let it sit naturally, kind of in as chilled out a manner as possible, the lower everything else in here will naturally start to settle. As we said before, the base of our tongue is attached to our larynx. It's attached via the hyoid bone, which is the only bone in your whole body that's not attached to any other bones. It's just a little linchpin between loads of little muscles and cartilagey bits, which is great. It means it moves because it's just attached to muscles. So that base of the tongue, the more we relax it, the more our larynx kind of naturally will sit a tiny little bit lower. Like even a couple of millimeters goes a really long way with this. We don't need to force our larynx as low as it possibly goes. And it will naturally move as we speak and sing anyway, because we lift and drop our pitch naturally as we speak, just to be expressive. But the lower the default, just hanging out placement of our larynx is, the longer this tube is, the pharynx. So the more space it has to resonate. That's all. And actually, physiologically, if you look at male and female voices, that space is one of the biggest differences, which is great because it's flexible and we can change it. What a delight. When we think about sort of male and female voices, particularly for singing, range-wise, there's very little difference between an alto and a tenor. They're basically singing the same notes. But we train the tenor to use lots of chest resonance, and we train the alto to use lots of facial resonance, and they come out sounding really differently. But physiologically, those voices aren't super different. We're training lighter, higher voices to sit higher, and we train deeper, darker voices to let the larynx sit lower.
Okay.
It's very
So,
technical, but the
it is
upshot,
technical,
it all
but it's
moves.
logical and it's doable. Do you know what I mean? It's actually doable, because I've never really thought too much about it. To be honest with you, I know most FTMs think along the same lines, like, the T will do it. I don't need to worry too much about it, but it doesn't always, you know. You can get some very squeaky sounding people out there. And that, you know, and definitely I've heard those who I'm like, oh no, you're not going to pass on a phone, pass perfectly here, but you're not going to pass on a phone. So if there's anything that they can do, which obviously, first of all, breeds from awareness of it, then that's going to be great. Now, I'm lucky; it's working now. The T is working, but it's still, I mean, less so now, but a lighter voice. Now, another thing, and I don't know, because again, I don't see any questions here, so I'm going to ask another one. The volume of the voice. Okay, so one of the things that I've noticed is that if you're maybe, pardon me, but angry, and you need to shout or project your voice, that happens a lot. It's much more difficult to do that, and it tends to feel like it's being squeezed, and then like almost nothing comes out. Now, I don't know if that's just me, but you know, is there, apart from stay calm, is there anything else that can be done to sort of help release that?
So sounds that we make when we're feeling really emotional are often one of the last pieces in the puzzle, because muscle memory just takes over. Broadly speaking, when trans femme people try to yell, their voice goes down, and when transmasc people try to yell, their voice goes up. It's purely a habit thing. So it's, when we're thinking about that, so the voice that you mentioned that a lot of trans guys have, that the sort of I'm keeping my larynx up where I used to hold it when I was a soprano voice. And this isn't a bad voice, it's not unhealthy, but if I tried to shout here, then it kind of closes and clamps up because that's so high. But if I kind of relax everything and let it sit down, I get a lot more sound with a lot less work here. I think a lot of people instinctively, when they're trying to make a lot of noise, squeeze here because they think the effort will translate into sound. But think about Pingu. All of this just opens up and he uses his tummy muscles to push that air really hard. It's a kind of feeling from right down there.
Right. Okay. So that's just basically old habits, essentially, that we're talking about here. So being more aware of this and using the Pingu version will help an awful lot with that.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we are starting to see a question come in through, but I've got to be very naughty. Go on, might as well.
It's your party.
Well, it's not really my party. Jess going to give out to me about this later, but that's okay. The what I've noticed, and maybe I'm alone in this one, but what I've noticed as my voice been breaking, it's been quite sore. And I had this like thing where kind of along here, it kind of felt like I was being cut. And if I ever looked down, it was like that. But even now, I have a sore throat. And I've had a sore throat for about 2 years now. So I'm guessing that means that it's not finished, that we're not done yet. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Could be a couple of things. It's a very normal thing to happen on T. If you've still got it after 2 years,
Yeah.
Either some muscles here have not adjusted, or there's something you need to speak to an ENT about. Educated guess, it's probably the former, but no guarantees. I'm not a doctor. Do you
Yeah.
have a straw to hand?
Straw?
Hmm.
Uh, no, I'm afraid I do not have a straw to hand. I don't have one in
Right.
the house at all, in fact.
Okay, I'm giving you homework then. Go buy a straw or just steal one from Pret. Again, why do things the hard way?
Okay.
You're gonna get a half full glass of water. You're gonna put the
Yeah.
straw in. You're gonna blow some bubbles to check that the water isn't gonna go everywhere. And you're gonna sing a low note into the straw, blowing bubbles. Ooh. I don't have a straw either, but that's what it's gonna look like.
Okay.
Um, do like 8 or 9 full breaths of that. Take a real breath in between if it feels like a lot of work. What that does is it puts a little bit of pressure back here because there's just a little bit of resistance when you blow, and that air pressure helps push open all of this stuff. It's a really good kind of reset if you've got a strained feeling voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so but I'll have to obviously repeat that so that that becomes kind of like muscle memory then.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Fair
Do
enough.
it
And
a couple
then
times a
over
day for
time.
a week, and if it doesn't change anything, ask your doctor if you can go see an ENT because it shouldn't be hurting for that long.
Yeah, but I also do a lot of talking in
Yeah.
my day job. So it could just be that fact, but it definitely feels more strained than it did before. But that's maybe just me.
It's not just you. Do you remember we were saying before that we have a bigger voice that still lives in a small house?
Yeah.
Um, because we've got that thick, big, low voice, those big vocal folds or vocal cords, same thing, living in just a regular old size larynx. They're already a little bit kind of tight in there. So if our habits involve squeezing it all, um, we'll fatigue our voice really quickly.
Mm.
So vocal tension broadly will fatigue a transmasc voice faster than any other voice, but it's bad for everyone.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, I will give it a shot, and I'm asking questions that other people want to ask. By the way, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Jess has said in the chat, but maybe you're not looking at the chat. We do have one question here. Um, I've heard trying to speak from your chest or lower neck makes your voice lower. Is that true?
So when we let our voice kind of resonate from our chest, it makes it darker. It may also make it a little bit lower if we dropped everything here to make that happen. Um, let's spend a minute working on chest resonance. Why not? That'll be fun. Um, excuse me. I have also been talking a lot today.
Mhm.
So, step number 1, if you're comfortable with a stretch kind of in the hips up to shoulders area, join us for this stretch. If you're not, chill for a second and join in on the next one. We're going to put one arm up, pick an arm, any arm, and gently tip ourselves up and over. Take a moment, feel all of your ribs kind of opening up a little bit. We're stretching those intercostal muscles a little bit. If you're comfortable, you can even tap here and maybe make a little sound. Just to remind yourself, oh yeah, I do resonate down there. Take a moment, straighten back up. Take a second to notice how the two sides feel different. Proprioception. And then do the other one. So, same thing, arm up and over. We're not working too hard. We're just having a little moment, feeling our ribs open up on the side. Have a little it's silly, do it anyway. Straighten on up. And again, this is very much an if you're comfortable with it one. We're going to sing a lowish note and just kind of tap all over our chest and see where it has the most effect on our voice. So for example, for me, it's right here in the sternum, and you can hear that is really changing my voice a lot. If you're not comfortable tapping your chest, that's totally fine. Have a little moment and see if you can picture the sound dropping down. But totally fine not to tap it. If you are comfortable with that, just for fun, have a little and then see if you can speak from there for a couple of sentences. You might notice you need a fair amount of breath support and a bit of openness here to make it happen. Neat, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm noticing much of a difference. Is that like you need to take more of a breath, or
Are you leaning back in a chair?
I am now?
Can you straighten up? Make sure your back isn't touching the back.
Okay.
Have a little moment of yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a very abstract thing, but can you picture your voice hooking into there and resonating?
I will have to picture it a little bit more. I hope that that's working for other people as well, though.
Yes.
Yeah. And it might tie into what someone else is saying here is like, how do you speak from your chest?
Mm. So we kind of need to put all of these things together for chest voice to work, particularly if you've got a naturally higher voice. If you're speaking sort of up here, you can get some chest resonance, but it needs quite a lot of big open space to make that work. Um, so your larynx, we want it to sit as low as it comfortably can, because that means the source of our sound is sitting a little bit lower. We want this whole kind of area nice and open. If you think about yawning or that big dog kind of pant moment, we're letting all of these muscles open up. We're dropping here. The pitch I'm using is on the lower end of my range just to make my own life easier. And then we're thinking about pushing air from our tummy muscles. And we're thinking about letting everything in here be part of the resonating chamber. It's slightly abstract. It might not work on the first time. You might need to practice the other things first to get it all going together. And that's totally fine. If you didn't get it today, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you need to learn other things first. It's a
All
class.
right. So it kind of sounds like, watch this webinar again and practice all of these little bits. And is that in the order that you've given us to? It's like the larynx and the stretching out thing, and then the lowering the tongue. Basically, that's a really good one. That makes a huge difference. That and the uvula, and then think about taking a deeper breath, but not forcing the air.
Yeah. So when we say deeper breath, a really good thing to practice is also just have a little look um, at your shoulders when you take a deep breath and see if they can stay still, so that you know that you're using your tummy muscles and not trying to focus up here and kind of tense. Another question.
Yeah, we've got one from Liam who's asking, he's basically saying he can talk lower, but is worried about the sort of confidence thing that comes with that, especially when you're sort of working on sort of nailing down muscle memory and consistency.
Yes. So my hot take on that is always start with um the lowest emotional impact situations as possible. So like just go into a shop, ignore the self checkout, make somebody physically check you out, and just make a tiny little bit of small talk in that voice. Or like any sort of out and about day to day type of stuff where you're speaking to strangers or near strangers, people who don't know you or care at all what your voice sounds like. Use that as the sort of initial getting into it moment for this, because the longer you've known someone and or the more kind of emotions you have tied up in that relationship, the more your body's just going to kind of take over and that muscle memory will come back in.
Sorry, that's good advice. So, would you say that a good idea is kind of like basically just walk around your house when nobody else was listening and just give this a try? Because I guess part of this confidence is you getting over yourself sounding silly, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on how people like to work. Some people will be totally comfortable to walk around their house and talk. Some people will absolutely hate that, and that's fine too. Um, Reading a book out loud can be really helpful. Um, And again, this is incredibly stupid, but for some people, just making the voice for somebody else is a really great way to do it. So give your D&D characters all different voices, read a book out loud and give the characters different voices, buy yourself a little hand puppet and give it a stupid voice. That can be a really nice way to practice in a way that doesn't feel like it's my voice and it's not perfect and I hate it. So we're literally just thinking about the mechanical skills of, I have a tiny high voice. I have a big low voice. This is what my muscles feel like when I change from one to the other. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Again, a lot of this is very silly, but try it anyway. You only live once.
But it helps. I mean, a lot of what you're saying here is the awareness of what it is that you're doing. And when you were saying that, like at the beginning, when you are thinking of just talking, you're not thinking about how you sound. I mean, maybe you are a little bit, but really you're more or less thinking about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And so that's the bit where you're not listening to yourself. So this kind of puppet thing, funnily, I think has been fun. But also is a good way, because if you pay attention, you'll really hear what the difference is and how it feels. And I think that's really what you're getting at here. It's being aware of that.
Yeah. It's a skill set that we're developing. It's a craft we're learning. It's not a pass fail. Does your voice sound how you want it to?
Yeah. Yeah. And so if someone was like doing this practice, like as you described here, how long do you reckon it would take before this would become sort of muscle memory?
Anywhere from a day to 5 years. Completely
Right.
depends on you and your voice and what you do with it.
Right.
I've had students who are voice actors come get an hour worth of advice and just be fine. I've had students take a lesson every week for a couple of years, practice really earnestly, and then they feel like they get it. Depends what your knowledge is. Did you have singing lessons? Do you do silly voices for things? Does doing a silly accent delight you, or is it terrible? Like yeah,
Okay.
it depends.
We've got one last question from Ross here, who's saying, for ex-soprano singers who are now exploring their tenor range, is there a sort of repertoire you can recommend?
That's another it depends style question. I think when a voice is changing, your best bet is to find repertoire with an octave or less of range and transpose it to wherever feels comfortable. So, for example, I often have students sing Summertime by George Gershwin because it's exactly an octave of range and it's got long held notes both on the top and the bottom. So, it's a really good way to explore range. Just start singing it on different notes and see where it sits really nicely. Um, yeah, yeah, that's my hot take. I think there's a couple of musical theater songs that sit really comfortably. Mr. Cellophane from Chicago has a nice kind of thing where most of the low stuff is borderline spoken, so you don't have to have a big boomy low voice to do it. I I had a student today sing Sunset Boulevard, and that worked really nicely. It's an octave and a couple notes, and it's in a really comfy tenor range. Like it only goes down to a C. That might be cute. But I don't know your range or what kind of music you like to sing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's turns out to be a very good suggestion. So good.
Great.
Thank you. I'm now going to listen to those. So I don't know them and try it. I got to give it a try. Like I said, I'm not in front of anybody. I'm not going to torture anybody with my singing, but I will give it a go just for the fun. So listen, Stephen, we've literally hit onto the hour, and I know that you are a little tight for time yourself with other stuff that you're doing, but I have to say, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed that. And I also didn't realize how much I'd really get out of this. And I hope that's been the same for everybody listening. I'm sure it has. Certainly the feedback that we got and people just like texting me and stuff like that after the last one that you did, people were delighted. And I'm sure that will be very much the same, here. So thank you so much for giving your time. Thank you so much also for creating another presentation. That was very kind of you to do that. So really, really appreciate that. And thank you for giving us those exercises and really, to be honest with you, making it easy. And that's the thing, because it kind of feels like a big hill to climb. And just by doing one or two very simple things, it really makes a big difference. And I think that that's the key. The key is not to overcomplicate this stuff, isn't it? And be kind to yourself about these things. How you feel you sound to yourself is very different to how other people perceive you. And even if you record it, it's still not quite, it tends to be more sort of like tinny than what you actually sound like in the real life. So to give yourself a break on this stuff, because I know that it's a big part of people on this journey, at the earlier stages. It was a big thing for me. So I can't imagine it's any different for that many other people. So yeah, exactly. So thank you so much again for your kindness, your wisdom, your expertise, your everything. It is very, very much appreciated. Brilliant. Yes, thank you. And also thank you to all of you who came and to watch this. We hope that you have very much enjoyed this. As we said, Stephen, if people want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
You can look at londontranschoir.com, I think, possibly .co.uk. Google London Transchoir. Or I think it's londontranschoir@gmail.com if you have further thoughts, questions, want some
Okay.
etc.
Brilliant. So please do that very clearly. Stephen is a complete expert in what he's doing here, and it's brilliant to have you here doing this. So thank you again for your time. You must also let us know when the actual trans choir is performing, because I'd love to come, and I'm sure we can get a group to come to that as well. That would be
definitely.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be brilliant? Yes, I think we should do that. Super stuff. So again, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you everybody else for watching. You now know how to get in contact with Stephen if you want to. If anything else comes up after this, either text myself and Jess or contact us and we'll pass it on to Stephen, or just go straight for Stephen, or whatever is the best way. If you're listening to the recording of this on YouTube, please put your comments and questions in the comments section below. You'll also see the contact details for Stephen below. So just look in the description and it is all there for you. So that's it. So thank you again. Thank you all for watching. And I guess until next time, we will see you again. So thank you so much, everybody. Take care and goodbye. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe just so you won't miss out on anything we do. Thanks so much.
Bye.